Welcome back to Benny's Custom Works, proudly supported by Valvoline and Sparesbox. Don't forget Benny 5 on checkout. This week, we're back on the Pajero Mini. I know you guys have seen a lot of this thing lately, but I really enjoy working on it and driving it, so sucks for you if you don't like it. But we're doing some more stuff today. We're again doing some of the winch projects, so obviously this thing's like the never-ending story. However, one part that we didn't install when we originally did it was the manual switching from both in and out functions. Basically, the reason that we didn't install that at the time was the wiring wasn't long enough, and I didn't have any pins to suit the connector that the OE had supplied with the winch. So rather than go cutting up all the original winch wiring and changing that connector, which is not a massive task, but I feel like if I ever need to send that thing back for warranty, the first thing they're going to do is complain about why something's been changed. With that in mind, I have actually found the correct pins for the terminal for the connectors that they've supplied. So we're going to be doing that. We're also going to be installing a GFB boost gauge up into the original cubby that would have had the compass, which doesn't work. And we're also going to be installing a new head unit because, like 95% of Japanese imports that come into the country, the radio doesn't work and no one has CDs anymore. So we've picked up a budget-friendly head unit which has Bluetooth and also has radio and it has Bluetooth calling as well. So bring this thing a little bit into the 21st century. Is it the 21st century anymore even? Is that even a phrase? Anyway, we're going to be doing stuff on the Pajero in the current century, which is right now, and it's 2023. So let's dive into it. We'll start ripping the thing apart, and we've got to drill holes in the firewall, which I don't like, but unfortunately, for whatever reason, there's no wiring grommet on the right-hand side of the engine bay, so we're just going to whack one in and be sad about it for about 10 minutes, and then we'll be fine. I reckon we'll just power slam the hole saw in there somewhere. It's going to be in the general. You know what's funny? I'll laugh if I reckon that actually is the right length. Like looking at it now, I reckon that actually will reach. I'm actually thinking now after all that sooking that I'm not even going to need to extend the wiring. And that red wire's just got to go to an accessory or ignition switch, which we're actually going to pick up all of those wires from the head unit loom because this is only effectively triggering a relay, so we don't need, it's not a high current circuit. We're also going to be wiring the boost gauge power and the boost gauge dash lights from the head unit loom as well. And I'm also hoping, because Japan's awesome and this has a head unit that's been in it forever, that it has a patch loom from the original Kenwood head unit that's in it to the Pajero Mini loom. And if that's the case, we can actually pull that loom out, make a breakaway loom on it on the desk. And I bought a Kenwood head unit purely hoping that Kenwood haven't changed the connector. So if they have changed the connector, then we're also going to have to change that section of the loom into the adapter harness. And I'm hypothesizing that the adapter harness even exists at this point. So going to drill a hole in the firewall, work out where to put this, and also run our vac line from the engine bay into the cabin because we do need obviously a vac line for the boost gauge reference. So we'll find a port. There are many vac lines already on the inlet manifold, so hopefully we can find one potentially that's just been blocked off. We can just put the line on it rather than having to run T-pieces and Christmas trees and all sorts of gear. But worst case, we'll just tee it off possibly the map sensor line. I actually like using either the map sensor line or the fuel pressure regulator line, only because if you lose boost reference on the gauge, it means that hose has come off. Now that may be counterintuitive to some people, but it is good to know, especially when you've got an OEM ECU car like this vehicle, that you've either lost your fuel pressure or you've lost your map sensor because depending on the vehicle, it may actually not go into limp mode, especially something old and simple like this K four-wheel drive. So good to keep in mind if you're playing around with a boosted setup that's on a stock ECU is to have that as your own fail-safe. Because obviously if the boost gauge stops working, 9 times out of 10 the hoses come off. It's not physically a gauge problem. So yeah, that's a good little tip to make sure that your operating systems on your vehicle are running as they should be.
Yeah, you reckon?
I basically drilled through the stud that mounts that sound deadener mat. Hopefully the drill will just sort it out. Don't love drilling into the main part of the dash, but there's no surface mount option, like it's all encapsulated in that housing. And I do like that you can't just bump it as well. So I could put it in there, but it's not really ever gonna, it's not gonna look any better regardless of where you put it. Oh, I don't like that, but what do? I need to drill it into somewhere. And it's not like the winch is ever gonna come out. Don't show everyone the stash drawer, bro. I'm supposed to share, this is secret. It's not great. You can reach it while you're sitting in the driver's seat, and that's really all that matters. We should raffle this like every other four-wheel drive channel. I'm not serious at all, not even a little bit. Can you see it now? Do you reckon it's gonna be long enough? Like, remember how I was like, oh, there's no way it's gonna reach?
Yeah.
That'll work all right, because once I've got the grommet in there, I'll bring it up here and tie it with that harness, so it's kind of not just swinging in the wind. So I'll make the connector up so we can work out the color green to the right. Oh, I didn't put the grommet on. Beautifuls. So I'm gonna actually bring that around the back side, just so I don't have heaps of strain on that connector. So I'll tie that there. I can tie that all in there neatly. Oh, can I just? Nope. So we've come to the point in the episode where we're doing the electrical stuff. So we're going to actually pull apart the whole center console cluster arrangement. The head unit's going to come out. We're going to pull out the top hood assembly thing because that is all going basically. The altimeter doesn't work, the outside temp and the clock, none of that works. When I say it doesn't work, the LCD crystals, half of those are dead. So yeah, the display doesn't really work as it should, and it's a very common problem with Pajero Minis. So I don't really want to go buying another secondhand one and hoping that it's going to be better. Everyone in the comments is going to go and get a piezo igniter or tell me to get a piezo igniter and revive it. That doesn't last long term. It may last a bit, but being that I don't really use any of that anyway, I will keep the unit, but I'm going to gut the fascia. So yeah, we'll pretty much pull it apart. I'll actually most likely make a new insert for that to just hold the boost gauge itself and then get rid of the rest of it. But once we pull it apart, I'll work out what exactly we can fit in there and play around with. But I think it's a pretty good spot for a boost gauge, and especially being that the compass doesn't work, it's just sort of repurposing what's already there. So we'll rip all that apart. We'll pick up our accessory power for the winch switch. We'll test that, and then we can also pull accessory power and illumination for the boost gauge, and then obviously install a head unit while we're there too. So lots of wiring fun times ahead. So we'll pull it apart and see how bad it is. Oh yeah, patch loom. So good. Interesting. Looks like screws maybe. Found some screws. Oh, why? We could actually get the illumination wiring and stuff out of that. Like just cut it off wherever that goes. Don't make me pull the whole dash apart. Huh. The screen's actually got a crack in it. It's been real, screen. Join the Navy.
Did that go in?
It was close. I paint the back side of that black and then just drill out that to put the gauge in. So that that's still in there just to block it off. The little GFB booster gauge. Does it fit, does it fit, does it fit, does it fit? Oh, it pretty much fits. I like that it's bigger than that. So I'll just literally run a die grinder around that, or a file, like this file. See what I mean?
Huh. It's like it's made for it.
Yeah.
People must watch this and think somehow all this stuff magically fitting is rigged.
I will admit that I looked at it and thought that was a good spot for the gauge, and that was as far as it went. I'll score along that line. Or that line. Hopefully I didn't just stuff it. No, it still covers the hole. Sick. Custom. So now I'm going to run that, and then we'll make a connector that goes on the back side of this, so that I'm going to actually glue the connector to the back of this, so it'll come through. Well, I might glue it, I might not, we'll see. Jesus, that's a aggressive stripper. I call her Chastity. So now we've got our original altimeter clock MISC wiring connector. I have stripped all 6 wires, make sure none of them touch, because I'm going to test basically with a test light effectively first. All I'm looking for at the moment, I'll take that out, is constant 12 volts, which probably will be black with a yellow trace for whatever reason. No, it's not. It is white. So that's our constant 12 volts. Now look for accessories. Which is our white with a red trace. And now I want dash illumination, which is red. You'll have to tell me all this at home because I'm going to forget this between now and wiring it up. And now I want ground. So what I'm going to do is get my test light and put it on whatever one of these was power, which I can't remember. Which one was power, Gian?
I knew I'd forget all of them.
Was it white? I'm pretty sure it was white.
Yeah.
Pretty sure it was white. Let's check. Let's be professional. Yeah, so white is our constant. Just going to stuff it in there or hold it because why not? And then our ground is black, which was not unexpected. So now I can pull this out and wire everything up. Because I don't know what these wires are or what they do, I've cut them off and basically heat shrunk them. So I'm just going to tuck them back in here. And then I'm going to tape a little bit of tape around that end. That obviously was the harness for the clock altimeter temperature unit. Oh, actually, one of those wires would have been outside temperature. Oh well, don't need that anymore. Constant power, ground, accessory, and illumination. Oh, I know what I can use for the boost gauge pass through. A bit of a hard line, like brake line. We've got our GFB boost gauge mounted up now in the original altimeter multi-combo housing setup. I have just run a short section of vac line with a, well, this is actually just a piece of brake line, hard tube. You could use a vac line joiner if you wanted to, but this is probably the most compact thing you're going to come across. The reason I've basically run this joiner is because the back housing is going to cover where the nipple is on the gauge. So I've just run this piece so that it'll just tuck out of this housing and it'll mean easy installation and removal when it's in the car. And yeah, I've just also put the wiring with it to run out of the same point. I'm not going to terminate this as yet because the connector unfortunately is larger than the housing. I may grind the housing hole out to actually enable us to put it together and take it back apart. But also with the length of the wiring, we can separate it without having to actually de-pin it or anything like that. So I'll most likely just terminate it once we put it together and then just leave it at that. It's like a marshmallow in a money box. It works. A handy little tip when you're plumbing in a boost gauge or any other type of accessory hose to a vacuum or pressure system, rather than cut the hose that you're actually joining into, just get a short piece of hose to extend it off the T-piece. That way, if whatever accessory you've plumbed in, regardless of what it is, if the hose that you've got running from your main source of vacuum or boost to that accessory, if that hose is compromised, you can literally just remove this really quickly and plumb your sensor or whatever it is that you've tapped into, fuel regulator back in, so that you can get home, whatever you need to do, you can drive the car again without having to try and work out how to block off one of these T-pieces. All too often I see people cut the OEM hose halfway through the hose to put the T-piece in. Now, in theory, that's a good idea, but like I said, there's no way to easily reverse it on the side of the road if you've got an issue. So I find a nice little bit of short piece of hose. It's only about 50 millimeters long, 2 inches. That's more than enough to extend that to get the T-piece in and get your accessory installed as you need it. Oh, they're so small now, they don't have a CD drive. It's like half depth. I suppose because nothing's a CD anymore, like, it's like half the size now.
Look at that weight saving.
Yeah. This is the Super Pajero head unit. So I'm just going to save this old deck for safekeeping because why not? Yeah, I'm going to keep this for later. Shark!
Nice filing cabinet.
Of course it only lines up with one hole. So I have to lineage that hole off because that's going to stick into the case otherwise. We've now got our harness re-terminated. Obviously this is the original section of patch loom that mates directly to the Pajero Mini. Fortunately I already had these bullet connectors which were going to fit across or fit directly into that harness, so we didn't have to re-terminate the original chassis side. So we've got that all now nicely taped up. Unfortunately it is very bulky where that connector is, but it just is what it is. There's a few extra wires and I'm still just going to tape the end up because they're not used in this setup. There's also one extra wire on this side as well that we weren't using for anything. So it's a pretty neat little compact unit. They're a little bit funny looking these days because there's no CD drive in them. The other thing is they're quite light. So yeah, it's pretty cool. We've got Bluetooth calling on this one as well. So we are going to mount the microphone just to the steering column. I don't know how successful it's going to be because it is pretty noisy in the cabin of that. But being that we do have it, we may as well put it in. So we'll run this, and then the last thing to do is install this, mount it into the dash, put the fascia in, and see if the thing actually makes noise. Hopefully the speakers aren't roasted. I don't know why they give you like so much length on these cables either.
Do you reckon it's because people run them up onto the roof lining?
Don't need your bloody logic here. Watch that last seconds. Wonder how much cheaper head units are these days now they're not having CD drives installed. Like, can you get a better head unit for the same price?
Yeah.
Without a CD drive? Well, it turns on.
Hey, disco.
It's got noise. Oh, the boost gauge lights up too.
Big gigs, little prices.
Makes noise. Woofed. Let's see if it works. Yeah, the gauge. No, it won't build positive boost revving the engine. We have got to drive it. Oh, it does. Well, now I just look like K-car things. Got to take it for a drive now. Well, it's another few simple tasks ticked off on the Pajero today. We've now got our manual winch switch working, we've got our boost gauge operational, and we've got a radio that actually works in Australia. So all little things that are just making this car better and better and more enjoyable to drive. So yeah, I'm really stoked with the outcome. I know this isn't quite obviously the caliber of stuff we're normally doing on the channel, but I genuinely love this thing. So every time I muck around with it, you guys get to watch it too. So sooner or later, we'll have the Cresta back in the country. We'll be doing all sorts of wild stuff in Australia with that. But for now, we're going to be doing some more stuff in America. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you next time.
How do you tell?
Yep.
Oh, right.
That didn't like whatever that was. Well, whatever that was has just died. Yeah, so we've lost the accessory circuit. we go. Fixed. So the dash illumination wire must have shorted out. God damn. I know the keys are in there. I put them there.